Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. This is the remote public scoping meeting for the Midtown South Mixed Use Plan, or MSMX. Just checking, we are live streaming to YouTube, so just checking if our audio and visual is coming through clearly. We will get started in just a few minutes at 2 p.m. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. You are tuning into the remote public scoping meeting for the Midtown South Mixed Use Plan, or MSMX. For the record, the City Environmental Quality Review, or CEQR number, is 24DCP094M. My name is Stephanie Shalou. I'm the Director of the Environmental Assessment and Review Division here at the Department of City Planning, and I will be hosting today's meeting. Everin Olker-Kajar, Deputy Director of EARD, will co-host today's meeting. I want to thank everyone for taking time out of your day to join us and attend this meeting. I also want to emphasize we'll hear from everyone who wishes to speak today, and this meeting will remain open until we've had a chance for all registered speakers to have an opportunity to provide their testimony. We also welcome written comments on this proposal, and we'll accept written comments through 5 p.m. on Monday, April 29th, 2024, and we provide written comments with the same attention and consideration as we do to comments provided live today at this meeting. If I can have production pull up our slide presentation. We will now proceed to the public scoping meeting for the Midtown South Mixed Use, or MSMX, proposal. Again, for the record, the City Environmental Quality Review, or CEQR, application number is 24DCP094M. Today's date is April 18th, 2024, and the time is approximately 2:02 p.m. Next slide. And next slide. Again, I'm Stephanie Shalou, the Director of the Environmental Assessment and Review Division, or EARD, at the Department of City Planning. The Department of City Planning is acting on behalf of the City Planning Commission as the lead agency for the proposal's environmental review. As lead agency, the department will be responsible for overseeing the preparation and completion of the proposal's Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS. Joining me today are several of my colleagues from the Department of City Planning: Eric Botsford, the director of the department's Manhattan office, and Nabila Malik, deputy director for the Manhattan office. As I mentioned, Evren Olker-Kajar, deputy director of EARD, and Max Marinoff, also from EARD, is the environmental review project manager. Andrew Cantu, Azka Moedine, and Ezra Moser, our lead planning team for the MS-MX proposal in the Manhattan office. We're also joined by additional members of the planning team: Abby Ryder, Audrey Wachs, and Trevor Lovitz. We also have Josh Simonow, Rich Wang on the urban design team, and Joy Kim from our counsel's office. We also have several members of the department working in the back of the house in this meeting to make sure that it runs smoothly today. Thank you, everyone, for helping today. Next slide. Together, we're here to receive your comments on the draft scope of work for the environmental impact statement for the MS-MX proposal. The draft scope of work identifies the subjects that will be analyzed in the upcoming draft environmental impact statement, or DEIS, and describes the methodologies that will be used in those studies. The draft scope of work materials are available on the Department of City Planning website and the ZAP search website. The purpose of today's meeting is to allow for public participation in the preparation of the DEIS at the earliest stage possible in the environmental review process. Specifically, scoping allows the public to help shape the DEIS before it is written. Toward that end, the department, as lead agency, will receive verbal testimony on the draft scope of work today from elected officials, government agencies, and representatives speaking on behalf of the local community boards, as well as members of the general public. As I mentioned, we also welcome written comments on the draft scope of work. Those can be submitted through Monday, April 29th, 2024 at 5 p.m. At the end of the written comment period, the department as lead agency will review all the comments we receive, those that we hear today, as well as any written comments that come through before the deadline. After carefully reviewing all the comments, the department will decide what changes, if any, will be made to the draft scope of work, and we will issue a final scope of work. It's the final scope of work that serves as the basis for preparing the draft environmental impact statement. Today marks the beginning of the written comment period on the draft scope of work. Again, as a reminder, no decisions will be made today regarding the draft scope of work. Again, the purpose is to allow the public to provide their comments, allow the department to listen to those comments, and consider them. And it's important for all voices to be heard today. I'll now focus on the structure of today's meeting, which will be divided into 3 parts. During the first part, the Department of City Planning will provide a brief overview describing the MS-MX plan. Then a representative from our environmental consultant, WSP, will provide a short summary of the draft scope of work. Together, this is around a 20-minute presentation. Then during the second part of the meeting, the department will hear from elected officials, government agencies, and those speaking on behalf of the community board. Then during the third and final part of the meeting, we'll hear from members of the general public. On to a few logistics. If you wish to speak and plan to join the meeting online using a computer, tablet, or smartphone, please register through the Midtown South Mixed Use Plan public scoping meeting on the NYC Engage portal. The website shown here on the screen, www.nyc.gov/NYC-engage. A link after you've completed that registration, a link to join us and provide your testimony will be emailed to you after you've completed that registration process. Then you'll be added to our speakers queue, and everyone who is registered to speak will have an opportunity to do so today. When when it's your turn to speak, I will call your name and you will be promoted to panelist. This will allow you to unmute your microphone and the ability to turn on your camera if you wish. There is a short period that appears you're no longer in the meeting. Don't be alarmed, you'll automatically rejoin the meeting as a panelist. At that time, you'll be asked to convey your remarks. To allow to hear from everyone who wishes to speak, we will ask folks to limit their remarks to 3 minutes. If you're viewing us on Zoom, a 3-minute countdown clock will run on the screen. And at that 3-minute mark, your time will expire. You'll be asked to conclude your remarks. This process does take a moment, so please be patient as we're promoting and managing speakers. An additional note for anyone joining by phone, if you wish to provide testimony via phone, please select *9 on your telephone when I prompt you. Please listen for me to call out the last 3 digits of your phone number. At that point, you'll be given the temporary ability to share your testimony. You'll need to press *6 to unmute your telephone, and we'll be able to hear you speak at the meeting. When your testimony is complete or your 3 minutes have expired, whichever comes first, you'll press *6 again to mute yourself. We'd like to encourage dial-in participants who wish to provide testimony to register using the dial-in participant hotline. That was the information shown on this screen at the beginning of the meeting. Next slide. On to time limits. Speakers from the general public have 3 minutes to provide their testimony. There are a few exceptions to the 3-minute time limit. Elected officials, for example, are given the courtesy of jumping to the front of the queue and are not time limited. To those of you viewing us on live stream and wishing to testify, please be mindful of potential background noise during your testimony. Make sure that the live stream is muted when you begin to avoid hearing an echo. If anyone is viewing the presentation but does not wish to provide testimony, please do remember that you can join this meeting to view the meeting on live stream using links on the NYC Engage and DCP websites. Again, if you wish to submit written testimony, it can be submitted to the Department of City Planning. Our mailing address is shown here, 120 Broadway, 31st floor, New York, New York, 10271. Attention to myself, Stephanie Shalou of the Department of City Planning's EARD. We also have an email address set up to receive your comments on this proposal. The email address is 24dcp094m_dl@planning.nyc.gov. As a reminder, those written comments will be accepted through Monday, April 29th by 5 p.m. If you missed any of our instructions, please do remember that there are instructions on how to participate and provide testimony on the NYC Engage website. We will now move on to the first part of the meeting where our colleagues from the Manhattan office of the Department of City Planning will provide an overview of the proposal.
Thank you, Stephanie. Next slide, please. All right, well, good afternoon. I'm Ezra Moser. I'm one of the study leads for the Midtown South Mixed-Use Plan. And we've recently completed a robust public engagement phase, which followed our March 7th town hall. And we're now at the outset of a process to further develop and refine the neighborhood plan. A neighborhood plan is guided by community priorities, our research, as well as local, citywide, and agency goals. Today, we're at the scoping meeting, which is where you, as members of the public, can provide recommendations on what should or shouldn't be included in the environmental analysis for this plan. Our environmental consultants are also with us this afternoon, and they'll be walking you through the CEQR process in more detail following this brief overview of the proposal. Next slide. So the total MSMX plan area spans about 42 blocks across 4 separate areas of Midtown South, which you can see outlined in the image here. The area is generally bounded by 40th Street to the north, 5th Avenue to the east, 23rd Street to the south, and 8th Avenue to the west. The 4 areas are clustered by their ordinal directions: northeast, northwest, southeast, and southwest. So why are we developing this plan and why now? As we've all seen, the COVID-19 pandemic has reshaped the way many New Yorkers work, commute, and shop. And in turn, these trends have impacted the commercial office market with hybrid work options, resulting in decreased demand for office space. Despite these recent trends, New York City has seen tremendous job growth over the last 20 years, but housing production has not kept pace with the city's growing population. The little housing growth that we've seen, particularly new affordable housing, has been concentrated in relatively few neighborhoods. And then you look at areas like Midtown South, which is central and has excellent transit access, where housing is not permitted because of half-century-old zoning rules. And so we feel it's time to undo the barriers holding back housing opportunity, give more New Yorkers housing choice. Next slide, please. So the plan area is located in what's arguably the most transit-dense part of the country, with access to 15 subway lines, PATH, LIR, NJ Transit, Amtrak, as well as commuter buses at Port Authority Bus Terminal. The sheer number of transit options have already made Midtown South a desirable place to work, but its accessibility also makes it an ideal place to live and highlights the need to consider the public realm in the planning process. Next slide, please. Because of its history as a commercial district and the restrictive zoning that prohibits housing, there are relatively few homes in the plan area, only about 2,300, which is compared to about 74,000 within a 10-minute walk. You can see on this map the pronounced difference between the dark red just outside the plan area, which indicates lots with housing, compared to the relative absence of housing within the plan area itself. The M16D district in the southwest quadrant reveals the untapped demand for residential development here. This was rezoned in 2011 to allow a limited amount of housing, and the M160 area contains more than a third of total homes in the entire plan area, despite covering less than 2 blocks. Several hundred affordable homes have been built here under the voluntary inclusionary housing program. It's important to note that Midtown South is a critical economic driver for both the city and the region. The plan area contains about 135,000 jobs in over 7,000 businesses, an employment density that's comparable to the core of the Midtown office districts to the north. In general, jobs in traditional manufacturing have declined sharply over the years, mostly due to changes in the fashion industry. These trends mirror broader macroeconomic headwinds for production-based sectors. Despite a decline in manufacturing, there's still a presence of fashion jobs, mostly in the northwest quadrant, although most of those are now office-based or include design studios, showrooms, retail, and wholesale. While all 4 areas grew at a faster rate than the city and the US over the last decade, remote work has significantly impacted the number of workers who are actually present in the office and is associated with high vacancy rates in commercial properties. Subway ridership as well in the area stations is only about 2/3 of what it was pre-pandemic, creating a noticeable drop-off in activity. So the existing buildings in the plan area reflect the neighborhood's industrial history. The area is almost completely built out, meaning there are very few undeveloped sites. The vast majority of buildings were constructed before the current 1961 zoning resolution, and nearly half of all buildings are larger than what today's zoning rules would allow. On your right is a map of existing built density, or FAR, and the darker the red, the higher the density, or the higher the FAR. The northwest is the densest part of the plan area, with more than half of existing buildings built to over 12 FAR, and a significant share actually between 15 and 39 FAR. These are very big buildings. The median FAR is similar in the northeast quadrant, and in general, the existing densities are slightly lower in the southern part of the plan area compared to the north, which calls out for treating these 2 general areas distinctly in a potential rezoning. Many of these buildings' architectural and structural qualities make them attractive candidates as well for office to residential conversions, a possibility that's currently precluded by today's zoning. Over the last few months, we have done robust community engagement and channeled what we've heard into our draft planning approach. We've held 2 public meetings, 7 stakeholder roundtables, held office hours for the public, and solicited public input through surveys, interactive maps, and online engagement tools. All these conversations and public feedback have been integral to shaping our understanding of the community's priorities for Midtown South. These priorities can be summarized under 6 main topics. The first is to increase the opportunity for more housing, including affordable housing, through zoning changes and state and city tax incentives. The second is to balance housing with legacy and growing businesses like fashion, wholesale, tech, among others. The third is to encourage development that's in line with the existing neighborhood context through bulk controls and conversions of existing buildings. Another community priority is to encourage more local retail and services in order to enable a livelier, cleaner, and safer streetscape. The community has also emphasized the need for a comprehensive and improved public realm for a better connected Midtown South. And last but not least, improved public safety is a major community priority. So at this point, you've seen the data and what we've heard from our engagement meetings. We've learned about the neighborhood strengths and some opportunities for improvements. We'll focus now on how we can use these tools at our disposal to realize our goal of making Midtown South a more dynamic 24/7 neighborhood. The planning approach we have developed is intended to be a roadmap for the next several months, guiding what our priorities will be as we flesh out a zoning proposal and the interventions outside of zoning. At a very high level, the plan seeks to foster a 24/7 mixed-use neighborhood within the plan area. We aim to create new opportunities for housing, including affordable housing, while also aiming to enhance the diverse economic sectors that already exist in the neighborhoods today. And of course, our goal is to address and help improve quality of life in the area by creating the conditions for active street life and public spaces. So taking our cue from those broad planning goals, we synthesized our analysis and stakeholder feedback and organized them into a series of recommendations under three main buckets: create vibrant mixed-use communities, support critical economic activity, and enhance neighborhood character. Each element of the approach is designed to complement and reinforce the others. So the first leg of the stool is supporting vibrant mixed-use communities. These neighborhoods are already a pretty lively part of the city during the day, but the key to supporting that vibrancy after business hours is by introducing more residents and diversifying the economy. Our recommendations include establishing mixed-use zoning districts that allow a broad range of uses, including housing, which is not allowed today in most areas of the neighborhood. We propose allowing housing at the highest density currently permitted by state law, 12 FAR, across all portions of the plan area. This will allow for housing both in new construction and in conversions of existing buildings. And at the same time, the city is advocating for the state to remove the 12 FAR cap so that we could potentially create even more housing. In the M16D area within the Southwest, as we noted earlier, there are zoning rules that do allow some housing, but there are restrictions on where it can be built. For that area, we're proposing to remove those restrictions. For the areas we're proposing housing for the first time, 20 to 30% of units would need to be set aside as permanently income restricted through the MIH program. Finally, the MSMX plan is complemented by citywide initiatives like City of Yes for Housing Opportunity, which would enable most commercial buildings to take advantage of more flexible conversion regulations that currently only apply to a few areas of the city and areas where residential is allowed. Recognizing that Midtown South is also home to tens of thousands of jobs, the second leg of the stool is intended to reinforce the neighborhood as a regional employment hub. We can accomplish that by allowing for higher commercial densities in the northern areas that reflect the existing buildings both within the plan area and the surrounding zones. And with a mapping of mixed-use districts, we can continue to allow commercial, wholesale, and light manufacturing uses, as well as offices, garment design, and production to coexist with restaurants and shops. Again, the MSMX plan is complemented by the City of Yes for Economic Opportunity, which allows for flexible live-work arrangements, allows different uses to intermingle in the same building, and makes it easier for businesses to locate and expand. The final leg of the planning approach focuses on enhancing neighborhood character. When we asked what they liked about the neighborhood, many expressed a strong affinity for Midtown South's loft architecture, particularly in the northern areas. Our approach recommends establishing urban design controls that ensure new buildings reflect that existing character of the neighborhood and create a more inviting streetscape. Second, by simply allowing for more homes and residents, we're going to encourage an expanded range of retail offerings and neighborhood amenities, which in turn will contribute to more active street life after work hours. And lastly, we heard loud and clear from the community that there are many concerns related to quality of life and the need to make the neighborhood feel welcoming and safe for everyone. Over the next several months, we'll continue to explore potential improvements in the public realm and resources to support vulnerable populations in the area. While zoning can go a long way towards making an area livable, we will also be working with our partner agencies to explore non-zoning approaches to improve quality of life. So now, informed by months of community input and research, we've developed a high-level preliminary zoning approach that we think goes a long way towards achieving many of the plan's recommendations. I want to stress that the preliminary zoning approach you're looking at is a draft. It establishes a scope of what the the environmental review is required to analyze, but can be refined over the next several months based on additional public comments. Our preliminary zoning approach replaces the existing M16 and M16D manufacturing districts and mapping high-density mixed-use districts. In the northern two quadrants, where existing built densities inside the study area are often a lot higher than what's allowed under today's zoning, we propose to map an M19A district, which would allow a base FAR of 15 for non-residential uses, paired with an R10 district, which allows residential uses up to 12 FAR with inclusionary housing. In the southern two districts, consistent with the built and allowed densities in and around the plan area, we propose mapping an M18A/R10 districts, which allows 12 FAR for all uses, non-residential and residential. These new M1A districts were created as part of the City of Yes for Economic Opportunity, and if fully approved, it would be the first time these districts would be mapped. While state law prevents us from allowing residential uses higher than 12 FAR, we at the city are pushing for changes at the state level that would allow us to add even more housing and for tax incentives to make things like residential conversion more likely and feasible. Based on our preliminary analysis, we estimate that over the next 10 years, the rezoning could result in around 4,000 new homes, including up to 1,100 permanent income restricted units. Of course, if the state acted to lift the 12 FAR cap and adopted new tax incentives, we could see even more housing. Like I noted earlier, we want to ensure that all types of businesses, legacy manufacturing, wholesalers, floral shops, as well as emerging sectors such as tech, can continue to call Midtown South home. The proposed paired districts allow the broadest possible range of light manufacturing, commercial, residential, and community facility uses. And finally, our zoning approach also seeks to establish bulk controls that reflect the neighborhood's loft buildings. Exact regulations like minimum and maximum base heights will continue to be refined over the next few months. So to achieve these aims, we're proposing a zoning map amendment in order to map the proposed mixed-use districts. We're also proposing a zoning text amendment that would, broadly speaking, establish regulations for a proposed Midtown South mixed-use district. As noted in the previous slide, the text would modify certain bulk regulations and would expand the radius of eligibility for transit bonuses and also expand the applicability of the covered pedestrian space bonus. It would establish the requirement for income-restricted affordable housing under the MIH program and promote the adaptive reuse of existing commercial buildings by eliminating non-residential floor area preservation requirements where applicable. So I'll now hand the presentation over to our environmental consultants, WSP, who will go through the CEQR components of the proposal and the draft scope in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Ezra. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jonathan Carey. I'm with WSP. WSP is leading a team of consultants to prepare the environmental impact statement for this project. That includes historical perspectives, BJH advisors, Harris, Miller and Hansen, Philip Habib and Associates, and Radin Consulting. Next slide, please. So CEQR is City Environmental Quality Review. It's a disclosure process by which decision makers evaluate potential environmental consequences of their actions. In this case, the two actions are the zoning text amendment and the zoning map amendment. And CEQR is the city's implementation of CEQRA, which is the State Environmental Quality Review Act. The analysis will compare the future no action and with action condition through a reasonable worst case development scenario and analyzes the increment in changes that could occur in the rezoning area if the actions are undertaken. So we are in the scoping process, and we are here to receive public comments on the draft scope of work that will be incorporated within the final scope of work, which is the final scope of work for the environmental impact statement. We will prepare the environmental impact statement under the guidance and in collaboration with the Department of City Planning. And then it will be published for public review and comment, and a public hearing will be held on the DEIS, and comments received will be incorporated into the final EIS. Next slide, please. So the Department of City Planning developed a reasonable worst case development scenario and the analysis framework. The analysis framework has a build year of 2034, and it analyzes the no action condition and with action condition in that year. The no action condition assumes no residential development and vacant and underutilized parcels are generally redeveloped given the outdated zoning. The with action condition assumes residential infill development, including 2 stories of commercial space, as well as some sites with a mix of residential, community facility, and or commercial uses. City planning projects that 27 sites would be redeveloped within the next 10 years. Those are the projected development sites. In addition, there are 16 potential development sites that are anticipated to be redeveloped, but probably in a longer timeline than the 10-year period. It's important to note that city planning is also analyzing conversion sites. So this is where the reasonable worst case development scenario accounts for a conversion of a certain number of commercial office spaces to residential uses given the implementation of the proposed actions. Next slide, please. So the table on this slide shows the no action condition in the second column, the with action condition, and then the increment in the final column. The increment is what we will analyze in the environmental impact statement. You can see in that column that there would be more than 3,000 new residential units, as well as additional affordable units. There'd be an overall decrease in office floor area and an increase in community facility space. There'd be a decrease in warehouse space and an overall decrease in non-residential use. Finally, there would be a decrease in total parking spaces in the area. At the bottom of the slide, you can see that there'd be a large net increase in residents and a commensurate decrease in workers associated with the increase in residential space and decrease in commercial office space. Next slide, please. So the draft scope of work incorporates all the topics that are slated to be analyzed. This includes every topic in the CEQR technical manual with the exception of natural resources, given the area's built-out nature. Key technical areas we anticipate to be covered are socioeconomics, traffic and transportation, and historic resources. In addition, pursuant to the CEQR technical manual, we will present mitigation, alternatives to the proposed action, and summary chapters commensurate with the requirements of CEQR. Next slide, please. The full draft scope of work and environmental assessment statement are available at this link. So you can download the materials and review them and submit comments either today or at a later period. I'll now turn it over to City Planning.
Thank you. Thanks, Jonathan and Ezra, for the presentation. At this point, we will now move on to part 2 of this public scoping meeting, where we will be receiving testimony from elected officials, folks speaking on behalf of the community board and any government agencies. When it's your turn to speak, your name will be called and you will be promoted to panelist. This will allow you to unmute your microphone and to turn on your camera if you wish. Again, as a reminder, it will appear as you're no longer in the meeting. You'll automatically rejoin as a panelist. If anyone experiences technical issues that prevent you from sharing your testimony, we'll pause, work to troubleshoot in the background while we move to the next speaker and come back to you if we're able to resolve the technical difficulties. If this happens, if you're not able to provide your testimony, note the information at the bottom of the screen in red and see the how-to guides on the NYC Engage website. You can also dial into our dial-in participant hotline. You can dial any of the toll-free numbers shown at the top of this screen, including 877-853-5247. And when prompted for a meeting ID, dial 618-237-7396. And when prompted for a password, dial 1. All right, we are ready to get into our speakers of elected officials, community boards, and government agencies. In this group, we have one registered speaker, that is Paul Devlin. So Paul Devlin will be our first speaker. We'll promote you to panelist in just a moment and be ready for your testimony.
Hello.
Hello, welcome.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. My name is Paul Devlin. I'm the co-chair of the Clinton Hell's Kitchen Land Use Committee of Manhattan's Community Board 4. Overall, we are in favor of the idea of converting commercial space to residential use to create a mixed-use neighborhood. We have a long history of advocating for new and creative ways of increasing housing stock, notably for permanently affordable housing, and this is a great step towards achieving those goals. However, as is often our concern, an overly broad, unnuanced rezoning may lead to unintended and undesirable consequences. We're asking to make sure that you dig deeper and examine for some of those unintended consequences. Overall, the theme of our concerns is that the noted architectural character and quality of the built blocks is maintained, and that unnecessarily overly tall buildings don't impede the quality of life issues in our neighborhood and create uncharacteristically tall glass pencils. The primary issue is the threat of demolition. We would stress that language needs to be included to ensure that the zoning advocates for conversion while ensuring the demolition is not something enticing to developers. There are some areas that already have high density without excessive height. For example, the majority of buildings on the west side of 8th Avenue between West 35th and West 39th Streets are currently well overbuilt above 12 FAR. To achieve the goal of converting those buildings to housing, there is no further need for such a major upzoning. We propose a more modest increase to map the same density that immediately to the west with a 13 FAR. And as part of the scoping, we would request a study of such a lower FAR. We have experienced that height limits coupled with high density does in fact work. Height limits will not hinder development, but will reinforce the neighborhood character of the existing garment centers, early 20th century loft buildings. The community board asks that DCP make its development objectives clear and provide adequate guardrails to protect the neighborhood from overdevelopment as it transitions from manufacturing lofts to a balanced, viable, and livable mixed-use commercial and residential community. In our written communication, we will be asking that the proposed zoning text address these matters without compromising fire, safety, and light and ventilation requirements for residential apartments. We also ask that you assess the impact of eliminating the dwelling unit factor. Community Board 4 requests language in the proposed zoning text amendment that will ensure development of smaller apartments if the DUF is removed and not larger units. Certain development sites within the Northwest area would be allowed to apply for covered pedestrian space bonus for floor area increase of up to 20%. We ask that you study other ideas for generating a floor area bonus, such as making a nearby subway station ADA accessible. Bringing me to the point that designating the MSMX project area as a central business district expands the CBD further south and west and encourages major demolition of building stock that would be converted to residential. The introduction of multiple incentives will push developers to demolish large existing buildings. This plan should stimulate the conversion of existing buildings, including those that are overbuilt, instead of incentivizing demolition of existing buildings. As to the worst case development scenario, we have concerns that the examination of proposed and projected development sites didn't take into account available transferred development rights if parcels are combined. We ask that a study provides assurances that the newly available FAR under the rezoning is not transferable to adjacent underbuilt sites, creating unnecessary and excessive height. Our final concern specifically is that within the scope, we have concerns regarding the fourth task regarding community facilities and services, which states that the threshold is not reached and thus no study is needed. We ask that you clarify what that trigger is that would necessitate this analysis, because our experience is that the development of Hudson Yards with no corresponding expansion of emergency services has overwhelmed the NYPD in the area. Adding residential density in the project area will further overwhelm emergency services, and we urge you to study the impact on the need for those emergency services. Again, we applaud the efforts to bring this necessary change to provide more housing units to bring about more vitality to our area. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for being here and providing your testimony. I think you said you would be submitting written comments, so we'll be looking to receive those. Thank you so much. All right, I'm checking our records. It looks like that was our only speaker registered in this group of elected officials, community board representatives, and government agencies. So at this time, we will move on to part 3 of the public scoping meeting, where members of the general public are invited to speak, and we're limited to 3 minutes. We will display our 3-minute time tracker at this time. Again, the protocol is the same. I will call folks' names in the order in which they registered. You'll be promoted to panelist and provided the opportunity to share your testimony. When your 3 minutes are up, you will be asked to conclude your remarks. And if anyone experiences technical difficulties that don't allow you to provide your testimony, we'll move on to our next speaker and try to troubleshoot in the background. All right, so moving through our speakers in the order in which we've registered, we have Maddie DeCerbo to be followed by Layla Logisico to be followed by Ali Bergazzo. So Maddie DeCerbo, you will be our first speaker in this group. You'll be promoted to panelist in just a moment. Hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Representing the Real Estate Board of New York. REBNY is the city's leading real estate trade association representing commercial, residential, and institutional property owners, builders, managers, investors, brokers, salespeople, and other organizations and individuals active in New York City real estate. REBNY appreciates the opportunity to comment on the Midtown South mixed-use plan draft scope of work. We support the Midtown South mixed-use plan, which considers recommendations by the Office Adaptive Reuse Task Force to rezone centrally located town districts from manufacturing use to allow for the creation of new residential buildings through conversions or new construction alongside commercial activity. The proposal is a comprehensive plan answering the needs of the current neighborhood and changing nature of work patterns while addressing the ongoing housing crisis in New York City. REBNY commends the Department of City Planning for this undertaking. New York City is facing a housing crisis with housing production significantly lagging job growth. New York City permits only 29 units of housing for every 1,000 residents. According to research by the Furman Center, increases in housing supply decrease or slows rent growth across a given jurisdiction and can lead to a decreased rent in the surrounding area. Outdated zoning regulations impede housing construction and undercut the city's fair housing goals. The City of Yes for Housing Opportunity seeks to address these inequitable barriers by expanding the city's capacity for increased housing development across all neighborhoods, while the MSMX plan will serve as a catalyst for housing production by permitting residential use in a neighborhood with great transit access and proximity to jobs. Importantly, the project area will allow for the highest permitted residential density and will foster office to residential conversions contingent on the passage of City of Yes for Housing Opportunity. Housing Opportunity will also introduce 2 new districts, R11 and R12, into the zoning resolution, which will permit up to 15 and 18 FAR respectively, above the existing 12 FAR cap. While the ability to implement a residential FAR higher than 12 will ultimately depend on state action, the department should include in the MSMX scope to plan these proposed new residential districts as potential options for the rezoning. The city's affordability crisis will persist without tools that allow supply to match demand. Rezonings like the MSMX plan are an important catalyst for securing more housing production in New York City. However, it's important to keep in mind that regulatory reform is not enough without a tax incentive, and the tax incentive won't work if there's no place to use it. Given the cost constraints associated with converting the affordability requirements that come with MIH, a tax incentive is imperative. While the Midtown South mixed-use plan will help to address the housing crisis in New York City and directly responds to the City of Yes housing opportunity proposal to permit conversion citywide, it's important to scope all possible outcomes such as residential density above 12 FAR. Lastly, conversions will not be realized and housing development will not occur without a tax tool from the state to offset the cost constraints associated with developing housing in New York City. Thank you for the consideration.
Thank you. Thanks so much. We had a little difficulty with our timer, but I think you were just right under the 3 minutes as is. So thank you for providing your testimony and for being here today. If you have written comments, of course, we're happy to receive them. Our next speaker is Layla Logisico to be followed by Ali Bergazzo to be followed by William Coggins.
Hello,
Hi,
good afternoon.
welcome.
Hi, thank you. My name is Layla Logisico. I am a former member of Manhattan Community Board 5, and I am speaking today as a concerned and educated resident. The scope of the environmental review for Midtown South proposed rezoning requires to be addressed both on its substance and its boundaries. On the plan itself, I urge the department to consider contextual zoning, neighborhood character, and historic preservation for a successful rezoning. The Ladies Mile rezoning that was enacted in 2005 should serve as your model. The plan should not entice demolition. Instead, the plan should encourage preservation and conversion of existing buildings. Excessive density will change the character of the district and should be reevaluated. I second the comments made by my colleague Paul Devlin of Community Board 4, and I urge the department to take these comments to heart. The area delineated by the proposal covers 4 quadrants that have the unique characters. The major absent is Penn Station and its surroundings. It sits smack in the middle, and it should be considered. The area is in dire need of comprehensive planning, while the existing GPP, a state plan, would override the underlying city zoning. The city zoning still coexists. It is imperative that the area be taken into account. Otherwise, we take the risk of the area being frozen in time for the worse. The GPP is disastrous. For example, it precludes housing on many sites around Penn Station as a permitted use. It is in a time of housing crisis, this is atrocious. The city must include the Penn Station area in its scope of work in this particular proposal. Furthermore, the environmental impact must assess the cumulative impact in the worst case scenario. And let me break it down to you. It is reasonable to assume that Beth Israel Hospital will close and that the NYCHA campus, Chelsea campuses will be redeveloped. Therefore, your scope of work and your data must be based on these assumptions, including the need for mitigation. It is critical that we are able to retain or provide sufficient hospital beds, school seats, and parkland for a population that could grow by 20%. Why does it matter? It should be self-evident, but I will share a personal experience that may convince you. I used to live in Tribeca, and I gave birth in a car because I lived too far from a hospital. Don't let South Midtown become a hospital desert, a park desert, a school desert. The CEQR environmental formula may not capture the full comprehensive picture, so use the CEQR formula as a floor and go beyond that. I am urging the department to take the reality into account beyond what CEQR tells you to do to fully evaluate the reality of the impact of this proposal. Thank you.
Right on time. Thank you so much. Thanks for your comments, and we're happy to receive them in writing as well. Thank you. Our next speaker is Ali Bargazzo, to be followed by William Coggins, followed by Grace O'Meara. Ali Bargazzo, you will be our next speaker. You'll be promoted to panelist in just a moment.
Great, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Excellent. Good afternoon. My name is Ali Bargazzo, and I'm the Director of Economic Development at the Flatiron Nomad Partnership. The partnership manages the Business Improvement District in the Flatiron and Nomad neighborhoods of Manhattan from 32nd Street to 20th Street, particularly the southeastern quadrant of the plan. The partnership generally supports DCP's proposal and submits the following comments regarding additional recommendations. The first is facilitating the genuine creation of Midtown South neighborhoods requires additional open and green spaces. In the project area south of 32nd Street, there are currently only 3 open spaces and 4 privately owned public spaces. To right-size the amount of open space with a more residential future in mind, it is imperative to prioritize the creation of passive and recreational public spaces. Secondly, Flatiron and Nomad are pedestrian-first neighborhoods that seek further public realm enhancements and infrastructure. DCP should use this rezoning as an opportunity for streetscape enhancements that will positively impact a new residential and pedestrian demographic. We urge city agencies to prioritize the reimagination of 6th Avenue to better balance modes of transportation and safety for residents, visitors, commuters, and workers. The partnership recommends the creation of a public realm improvement fund, concept plan, and a governing body charged with the selection and allocation of funds towards pedestrian realm and transit network projects. Third, specific office to residential conversion sites should be explored and incentives should be implemented. We have heard from building owners about the challenges of office to residential conversions, including incompatible floor plates, prohibitive costs, and FAR limitations. We ask that DCP and our elected officials continue to investigate potential incentives to encourage conversions where appropriate and feasible. The document should also identify sites where potential housing units could be created through conversion. Finally, support for existing small businesses and legacy industries. When examining potential business displacement, we recommend that DCP investigate appropriate and flexible protections and incentives specifically for long-standing industries and for their employees. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your testimony and for being here today. All right, our next speaker is William Coggins. William Coggins, your name is showing up twice in our speakers list. So if the person in the room that registered, if you could please click the raise hand button in Zoom so we know which person to promote here. William Coggins, if you are in the room and can click the raise hand feature in Zoom. All right, not seeing anyone raise their hand for that name. So we'll move on to our next speaker and try to contact that person in the background. So we will move to our next speaker, Grace O'Meara. Grace, you will be our next speaker here.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
My name is Grace O'Meara. I've lived in Manhattan for the past 3 years. I also spent the first 10 years of my career in the garment district as a sweater designer at Ralph Lauren and Tommy Hilfiger. I'm a member of Open New York, a nonprofit that advocates for housing that we need in New York City. I'm participating in today's meeting because the Midtown South rezoning is a rare opportunity to add new housing to a part of Manhattan that remains locked in the past by outdated zoning rules. I'm very excited that the city is taking the initiative to rezone this area to create a more vibrant 24/7 future for Midtown South. However, in the DCP's final proposal, I hope they include options to build or convert denser residential buildings than is currently included. As DCP's scoping documents show, the Midtown South area already has very dense buildings. For example, buildings in the northwest part of Midtown South have FARs of up to 30. It is totally reasonable for the city to include options for denser and higher housing in this area. It would be contextual with what already exists. We are in the middle of a dire housing and climate crisis, and Midtown South, with its fantastic transit connections and proximity to the greatest concentrations of jobs and entertainment venues in the country, is the perfect place to add more opportunities for new housing of all kinds. I hope DCP will revise the scope of the rezoning and analyze the possibility of additional and denser residential development in the area. Thank you very much for giving me time to testify.
Thanks for being here today and for your testimony. That brings us to the end of our speakers queue. I will once again ask if William Coggins is in the Zoom and could click the raise hand button in the Zoom so that we can hear your testimony. All right. We are going to take a brief pause. This does bring us to the end of our registered speakers list. If you are in the Zoom and we did not call your name, it means that you did not register through the NYC Engage portal, and we would ask you to do so now so that we can hear you and you can provide your testimony at this time. The information to register to speak is shown on the screen at this time. Please visit the NYC Engage website, www.nyc.gov/NYC Engage or Engage. Under the Upcoming Meetings tab, click City Planning Scoping Meeting for Midtown South Mixed Use Plan, and you will see a link to register to speak. If you're having difficulties, please dial one of these toll-free numbers shown at the top of the screen, including 877-853-5247, and follow the instructions shown in red at the bottom of the screen, using meeting ID 618-237-7396 and password 1 to receive help on registering or joining the meeting. At this time, I believe we have a 5-minute timer. If we could move to that slide. And at this time, we'll take a 5-minute pause. We'll be back at 2:57 to reconvene the meeting and hear from any registered speakers who've had a chance to register during our break. So we'll be back in just a few minutes. See you all shortly. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is the remote public scoping meeting for the Midtown South Mixed Use Plan, or MSMX. Again, for the record, the City Environmental Quality Review number is 24DCP094M. My name is Stephanie Shalou, Director of the Environmental Assessment and Review Division. We are currently on part 3 of our public scoping meeting, where members of the public are permitted to speak up to 3 minutes on this matter. After the 3 minutes are up, you'll be asked to conclude your remarks. We were just on a 5-minute recess to allow anyone who had not yet had an opportunity to register to speak to do so, or anyone that was viewing the YouTube to go ahead and register to speak. We will now turn to those speakers who have registered during the break. There is one additional speaker at this time, James Francois Pijuan, who appears to be in the Zoom at this time. So James, you are our next speaker. At this time, we will promote you to panelist. It will appear that you're no longer in the meeting for a second. You'll automatically rejoin and be invited to share your testimony.
Am I on?
Yes,
Great.
welcome.
Hi. Basically, a florist here in 28th Street, between 6th and 7th, and I am trying to speak for the florist businesses that are in this community, and as well as for the artists that work in the buildings here. We are more than happy to have the area rezoned for residential and for lower income. We're all for that. The only thing that we're struggling with is to retain our businesses here because a lot of the development that had happened because of the hotels in the past. So currently we're just wanting to know if you can help retain the businesses that we have here. The florists have been here for several generations, some since the 1930s. So that's basically it. We're just, as floral businesses here, we're fighting to survive, just like the fashion industry. And we're just hoping that not only that we also get, it'll be great to have, more people who, are lower income to live in a neighborhood, which would be great, but also some way you can retain our businesses and help provide incentives for the landlords to keep us here. Because so far, a lot of the businesses have been closing because of the rents. So that's basically it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your testimony and for joining the meeting today. All right, I'm seeing if any other registered speakers had an opportunity to register to speak at this time. And at this time, we are not seeing any additional registered speakers. If you are in the room, have not yet registered, have not yet had an opportunity to speak and wish to do so, if you could use the raise hand feature. Otherwise, we will move to close this public scoping meeting. All right. Anyone back of house have anything? All right. At this time, it does appear that we have reached the end of our registered speakers list, and there is no one else indicating that they wish to provide testimony at this time. We also do not have anyone in a dialing into the meeting via phone wishing to provide testimony. So at this time, we will move to close the public scoping meeting. If anyone had difficulty providing testimony today, please recall that you can submit written testimony through the NYC Engage portal. If we could go to, I believe there's one slide with the information on how to provide testimony. You are invited to provide your written comments to us. Our mailing address again is 120 Broadway, 31st floor, New York, New York 10271. And the email address set up for this Proposals draft scope of work is 24DCP094M_DL at planning.nyc.gov. This information is provided on our DCP website. And oh, I see we do have one last registered speaker right under the buzzer, so we will hear this person's testimony at this time. Paulo Ribeiro, you are right in under the buzzer. So we will just at this time promote you to panelist, and you'll be invited to provide your testimony.
Hi.
Hi, welcome.
Thanks for letting me join last minute. I submitted an email today. I just want to chime in one issue that I think is critically important. I live on for consideration for redevelopment of this area. I live on West 36th Street. Is one of the few residential units on the northwest quadrant of the proposed area. And one of the major, if not the major issue we in my experience face there is traffic and associated noise with traffic. And something I hope part of the congestion pricing intent to reduce vehicle traffic in Midtown would help. But I think it's important as you try to bring more residential folks, develop more residential units in the area, that it's properly addressed. I moved from the Upper West Side, and the difference is night and day between what you have. I knew what I was getting into. I got more space there, so as described in your plans, that area has more loft-like kind of space that could be used, adapted to residential use. I'm very happy with the space I got, but that said, the amount of traffic and noise associated with that is staggering. I moved right around the pandemic, so at the time wasn't an issue. We know what happened at the beginning of the pandemic, but now it's just beyond what would be acceptable on the normal quality of life criteria that people would look in my opinion, in a residential area. I think I saw too that during the recently environmental justice report that came out, that particular corridor around 36th Street is one of the areas where there is just too much pollution of any kind, and thus I think that initiatives that would reduce pollution air, and it's one that people most talk about. Noise is the quote unquote silent one that people don't talk, but again, it's just to stress the need to reduce and adapt some streets, be curbed, how the curbside is used, traffic patterns. In the report that was submitted by the governor and the mayor at the end of December 2022 about what to do about Manhattan in general and Midtown was a big focus of that. There was also raised as a concern in that area is how traffic patterns are getting from bad to worse, and the need to address that. And I think, yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for your testimony. I'm glad we were able to hear your testimony. And of course, any comments that we receive in writing by the deadline of Monday, April 29th, 2024 by 5 p.m. will be given the same consideration as we provide to those received in this meeting. For everyone who provided testimony, as for your reference, all of the comments that we heard today and those that we receive in writing will be summarized and responded to and published along with the final scope of work, which again presents the methodologies to be used in the upcoming draft environmental impact statement, and any changes that are made based on the testimony that we hear today will be documented. I want to thank everyone again for coming out virtually and joining this remote public scoping meeting. We appreciate everyone's thoughtful testimony. Again, we look forward to also receiving your comments in writing if you would like to submit them, and continuing this environmental review process. At this time, we will close the public scoping meeting. It is 3:07 p.m. and the public scoping meeting is now closed. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.